Hello everyone, this is Anita again. There is going to be a video, not a video, a content warning for this video. I want to express that both in the description below and also at the beginning. If you are dealing with issues of suicide, self-hate, self-loathing, being overwhelmed with shame and guilt, frankly, you already know what this video is about, and there's no point in you watching it at this point. I'm going to do a companion video on this on sort of a theological response, and that may be of some interest to you, that may be of some help. I'm going to link that in the description below when I get that actually done, which hopefully will be the same time that this one is, or shortly after this one is done. For those of you choosing to stay around, this is going to be a fairly dark video. I don't intend for it to be depressing, but frankly, there are parts of this journey that are very challenging, and the last couple of weeks have been very challenging. I guess it's been about 3 weeks since my therapist has asked me to go back and do a review of the journal. I've mentioned the journal before in one of the other videos, or a couple of the other videos. I started a journal when I first started wondering about my gender identity. That was in December of 2016. And so the journal now has, as of today, it's over 200 pages long. At the time that she asked me to do a review of the journal, it was about 184, 185 pages. So she wanted me to do a review of the journal, and the idea was that she wanted me to start becoming aware of feelings that I wasn't talking about, feelings that I wasn't dealing with, and in particular to start looking at what I called the abyss, which is really going to be the subject of this video. And I don't know that I've really talked about the abyss before. I may have talked about it as a chasm, or I may have talked about it as being sort of a black hole. But the abyss really is a whole sinkhole, chasm, whatever, however you want to think of it. I tend to think of it as a canyon full of darkness. But the sinkhole, or the abyss, is where really a lot of the negative feelings lie. There's a lot of shame, there's a lot of guilt, there's a lot of self-hate. There is a lack of feeling of worthiness, and ultimately it gets to a point of a lack of feeling that I deserve to be loved, or I deserve any love at all, that I'm intrinsically wrong, intrinsically bad, intrinsically evil, and that I should die. And I've known, I know that that's what's there. But it's one of those things where in the past, there was a period that right after I came out of church, and I think I talked about it in another video, where I had a negative reaction to the support I'd gotten at church when I came out, that was based on the fact that I expected that I should be hated. That seemed to be the appropriate response, or that people should be angry with me, or that people should reject me. And those are the responses that are expected by the abyss. That's what the abyss thinks that I should get, and the abyss is really the internalized transphobia. It's the internalized shame, the internalized self-hate that grows up being a woman in a man's body, having everything misinterpreted, uh, feeling like you're weak. There's the shame of not fighting for yourself. All those things go into it, and I don't really feel like getting into all the depths and details of it, but I managed to, in the review of the journal I did, started looking at shame, which, interestingly enough, is one of those things that I had. There's a workbook that Dara Hoffman Fox created for you and your gender identity. It has a shame and a guilt inventory in that workbook, and I had done that prior to starting therapy. The score that I got on that was actually what motivated me to go into therapy. And when I was doing a review of the journal, my therapist has also sent me some other inventories to do on physical dysphoria. And I thought, oh, I never really talked about the shame in therapy. It's what got me into therapy in the first place. I've never really talked about it. And so I started looking at that. I started looking at the places where it started resonating in the journal that hadn't been marked in the journal. And so, and I realized how quickly the shame led into the abyss. That in some ways, getting in touch with that shame was a great way of plowing headfirst into the depths of the abyss. And the reason for going into the abyss at this point in time, and I meant to do this in another earlier video, and I'm not sure I ever did. But the reason for going into the abyss is because I started having feelings that whenever if I ever have surgery, which is a doubt right at the moment, that I'm going to be able to afford it, that when I got done with surgery, the first time I saw my new nether region, if you will, that I was going to be overwhelmed by all these negative feelings simply because they'd all be released at once. And so the idea is to try to, over a period of time, drain the swamp, to pick a bad connection, or a bad reference, but basically to drain this reservoir of negative feelings, to get the abyss to where it doesn't have the power that it once did. And it doesn't have the power that it did when all of this started. And so the feeling was that I'm a stronger person, the abyss is weaker, and this is maybe a good time to actually try to drain as much of it away as possible, so that I feel better about the transition, and react more positively to post-surgical viewing of the results. And so anyway, that was the point of going into the abyss, or starting to review things to figure out the abyss. And the shame, still haven't, I have a session next Wednesday. We'll probably start talking about it at that point in time. It hasn't really been able to, I haven't been able to really work through it, but it did trigger a fairly deep dive into the abyss when I first started thinking about it. And I came up with some words of reassurance, in terms of talking about what I was trying to do at the time. That, I understood the shame, but that it really wasn't deserved. That I was just a young girl trying to figure out how to be recognized as a young girl and trying to survive to become the young woman and the woman that I needed to become. what happened after that, though, is I handled that fairly well. I wrote something up, I sent it off to my therapist. It was a confession of shame and a statement of assurance afterwards. But then last week, um, when I found out that Medicare has pulled back from paying for um, gender reassignment surgery or gender confirmation surgery, or my preference is gender congruent surgery, uh, at least in Maryland, that the Maryland contractor has just been summarily dismissing all the claims or denying all the claims. And that raises the specter of having to do self-pay, which is a financial hit that I don't believe my wife and I can actually take, and still have adequate income to see us through retirement. And certainly not proud of this, but I started feeling that I had made a mess of things, and that I had been making a mess of things all my life. It started resonating with the feeling of having made a mess of things when I was a child growing up, because everything was wrong, and that all spiraled. And it wasn't a gentle descent into the abyss, it was a headlong dive into the abyss. And it triggered my plan for how I deal with suicidal ideation. And the plan worked. That's the good news. Bad news is I needed to use it. The good news is it worked. It worked fine. It worked well. It's told me a lot about the structure of the abyss. Someday when I'm feeling stronger and I'm feeling better about things, I may talk about that. But I felt like it was important for those of my friends, maybe people who are coming and sort of struggling with why would someone actually go through a rather difficult surgery that has some painful aftercare, some things that are difficult or more challenging to do. I shouldn't say really difficult, but that the importance of having the surgery is critical. That it's not, it addresses a lot of the sources of shame, the sources of anger at oneself, the sources of anger at one's body, because of the limitations of being a woman in a man's body, especially when you're younger and growing up. And really sort of helping maybe, I don't know that any parents of young children are going to see this, but understanding the ramifications of really not really listening to your child, and supporting them in their gender identity quest. The sense of identity is extremely strong in most transgender people, and denying it, which is what I did, doesn't lead to anything that's happened. It leads to the abyss, and the abyss has one outcome if it takes over, and that's suicide. So anyway, that's kind of what I wanted to say. I'm not really sure I ever knew exactly what I wanted to say in this video. I apologize for the darkness of this video, but I don't apologize for the journey that I'm on, and this is part of that journey. So thank you very much for watching. I am doing a companion video to this. I hope to have it out roughly at the same time I put this one out. I'm hoping I can do it almost immediately after this one in terms of actually making it. To talk about a theological perspective that unfortunately I didn't think about last Wednesday when I was going through my difficult time. But a theological perspective that I would hope that people who are really struggling with a sense of despair, can actually might be actually helpful. It's hard to hear it, I think, at that point in time, but if you're a little bit above where the despair is, maybe it would be helpful. But anyway, again, thank you very much for watching. Good night.